Hello, everybody, and welcome to me reading you a few short, scary stories. The list of stories I've gotten this from is by a lovely individual called Zoe Marland from a website called, I can't pronounce it, but I'll put it up on the screen. But the first story we have is Who's in My Bed? A father went to go say goodnight to his 7-year-old son, very well knowing that if he didn't, his son would have trouble sleeping. It was a nightly routine between them. He entered the dimly lit room where his son waited under his blanket, and with the first glance, the father could immediately tell that something was unusual about his son tonight, but he couldn't really place his finger on it. He looked the same, but he had a grin that drew from ear to ear. "You okay there, buddy?" the father asked. The son nodded, still with the grin, before saying, "Daddy, check for monsters under my bed." The father chuckled a bit before getting on his knees to check to satisfy his son. There under the bed, pale and afraid, was his son, his real son, and he whispered, "Daddy, there's someone on my bed." The next story is the red wristband. A doctor was working at the hospital, a hospital where patients were tagged with colored bands. Green meant alive while red meant deceased. One night the doctor was instructed to get a few supplies from the basement of the hospital, and so he decided to go ahead and head to the lift. The doors opened and there was already a patient inside minding her own business. It wasn't unusual because patients were already allowed to roam the building of the hospital, especially those who have already stayed there pretty long. The rule being that they had to be back in their rooms before 10. The doctor, however, smiled at the patient before pressing a number for the basement, but he did find it unusual that the woman didn't already have a button pressed, so he just assumed that she was heading for the basement too. But when the lift finally reached the floor where the doors opened, there was a man limping towards the elevator from a distance, and in a panic, the doctor slammed the elevator button to close, and when it finally did, the lift began to ascend back up, and the doctor's heart was pounding in his chest. "Why did you do that?" "He was only trying to use the lift," the woman stated, annoyed. "Did you see his wrist?" the doctor asked. "It was red. He died last night." "And I would know because I did his surgery." The woman lifted her wrist and he saw red and she smiled. "You mean like this one?" The next story we have is called White with Red. A man just moved into an apartment and asked the receptionist to get his keys. The receptionist did give him his key with a smile. However, she did bother to warn him to never to disturb the door with no number. He wondered why, but he didn't bother to ask. He was much too busy with his new apartment to even bother caring. However, after he unfinished packing, he started to get curious. He questioned why the receptionist would warn him of such things, and against his better judgment, he stepped out of his apartment to check the door with no number. He tried the doorknob at first, but it was locked, so instead he got onto his knees and peeped through the keyhole. The apartment, for the most part he was looking into, was empty. His eyes scanned all over the whole place, and it stopped at a woman standing face first against a wall in a corner. He noticed her pale skin and long black hair before stepping back, suddenly feeling perverted for invading someone else's privacy. He brushed it off, assuming she was just an individual who did not want to be disturbed. The next day, he got more curious about the woman and eventually went back, straight away getting onto his knees. He peeped through the keyhole and all he saw was red. red. He assumed the pale woman must have caught him peeping last night and covered the whole room with something red. He left the door alone and instead went down to the receptionist to ask her questions. The receptionist sighed and asked, "You looked through the keyhole, didn't you?" He admitted to it, and so she felt obligated to tell him the story. She told him a couple used to live in that apartment a long time ago, and the husband went crazy and killed his wife. However, this couple wasn't normal at all. They had pale skin, black hair, and red eyes. The very last short story we have is A Mother's Call. A daughter was in her room upstairs doing her homework when suddenly she heard her mother's call to come down for dinner, and immediately she jumped to her feet and began making her way towards the stairs, but before she even managed to take a step, hands grabbed her and pulled her into the laundry room beside the staircase. She panicked before realizing it was her mother, her real mother, her eyes watery and bloodshot. "Don't go down there, honey. I heard it too." That's all we have for tonight. If you enjoyed these stories or just the video in general, please be sure to tag along. I do plan to upload more of these. And as always, good afternoon, good morning, and good night.